Send out a text. Check to make sure we're online. Check to make sure we are online. And all right. I just do something here. Anyway. All right, so we're going to get started. Let me pick a Vaishnav song. One of my favorite, Sri Radhikastava. So we get the guitar. Okay, here we go. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Gokula Taruli Mandala Mahite. Taroli Mandala Mahite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Rati Vardhana Veshe Aidiskuta Vrinda Vipineshe. Namo Rati Vardhana Veshe Aidiskuta Vrinda Vipineshe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Aidiskuta Vrinda Vipineshe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai Jai. Shabhanutadi Navashashi Leke Lalita Sati Gunaramita Vishage. Shabhanutadi Navashashi Leke Lalita Saki Guna Ramita Vishake. Jaya Jaya Madhava Korunam Korumai Karuna Bharate Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite Korunam Korumai Karuna Bharate Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Gokula Taruna Mandala Mahite Tarune Mandala Maite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Paravanikacharya, also Teta, Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace. Abhaya Chanananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Mahārishila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Mathuranam Ki Jai. Jagadasami Ki Jai. Yamunamai Ki Jai. Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namahum Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharani Devashesha Shunyavadi Paschata Dejatarni. Let me read the translation. O Radha, all glories unto you, all glories unto you, beloved of Madhava, object of worship for all the young girls of Gokula. You dress yourself in such a way as to increase Lord Damodar's love and attachment for you. You are the controller of Vrindavan, the pleasure groves of Lord Hari. You are a new moon risen from the ocean of King Vrishabhanu. You are the friend of Lalita, and your wonderful qualities, friendliness, kindness, and faithfulness to Krishna, endear you to Vishaka. You are an ocean of compassion, and your divine characteristics are described by the four Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatan, Sananda, and Sanat Kumar. O Radha, please be merciful to me. Jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Ki Jai. So, we're continuing with our study and reading of Prabhupada's Krishna book, which is the summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're nearing the end. We're on chapter 71 today, and this chapter details Lord Krishna's visiting Indraprastha city. Now, if you remember what Indraprastha city is the city established by the Pandavas when they were actually given half of the territory by the Kurus, and originally it was called Indraprastha, that whole area, and it was a desert area, and the Pandavas actually developed it with the help of Krishna, with the help of Agni, uh, and with the help of Mayodhanava. They were able to develop this whole area into a beautiful place, and actually the palace in Indraprastha, because of Mayodhanava's influence, made it seem that there was water when it was land, and land when there was water. And we all know the story of how Duryodhana got confused and he fell into the water, and everyone was laughing at him, and it made him further angry at the Pandavas. And so, and also he ran into a doorway that he thought that the doorway was open, but it was actually, the door was completely transparent. So in this way, the Pandavas were living at Indraprastha, and of course, what happened with Duryodhana happened after this particular period of when Krishna was visiting Indraprastha. Because Krishna was visiting Indraprastha before the performance of the Raja Suya sacrifice. And during this visit, he's planning on how to get rid of Jarasandha, which we'll hear about very, very shortly. Okay, so let us, hold on a second. Oops, let me mute the phone. So let us continue with Om Ganatimiranda Shagananjana Shlakya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tuzmai Shigurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual masters, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So kindly open my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So here we are at chapter 71. And those of you who can see the screen, you'll see that we're sharing it. And you can read along with us if you like. Here we go. Chapter 71, entitled Lord Krishna in Indraprastha, the city. And actually it was named Indraprastha after Indra. Because Krishna and Arjuna had to fight with Indra to burn the Khandava forest. And basically Arjuna won. And in honor of Indra, he actually, because Indra was trying to protect the Khandava forest because his great devotee Takshika was living there. But Takshika actually wasn't there at that time, but Takshika's family was there in the Khandava forest. And because of Takshika's family getting burnt up and dying, obviously, Takshika had this long simmering animosity towards the Pandavas, and eventually he killed Parikshit Maharaj. Actually, he didn't kill Parikshit Maharaj, it actually went into samadhi before Takshika bit Parikshit Maharaj's body. So let's continue. In the presence of the great sage Narada and all the other associates of Lord Krishna, Uddhava considered the situation, then spoke as follows: My dear Lord, first of all, let me say that the great sage Narada Muni has requested you to go to Hastinapur to satisfy King Yudhisthira, your cousin, who is making arrangements to perform the great sacrifice known as Rajasuya. I think, therefore, that your lordship should immediately go there to help the king in this great venture. However, although to accept the invitation offered by the sage Narada as primary is quite appropriate, at the same time, my lord, it is your duty to give protection to the surrendered souls. Both purposes can be served if we understand the whole situation. So the other purpose was to kill Jarasandha. Unless we are victorious over all, because Jarasandha had actually kidnapped all these kings, was getting ready to sacrifice them. So Krishna's duty is to rescue the kings. Unless we are victorious over all the kings, no one can perform this Rajasuya sacrifice. In other words, it is to be understood that King Yudhisthira cannot perform the great sacrifice without gaining victory over the belligerent king Jarasandha. The Rajasuya sacrifice can be performed only by one who has gained victory over all directions. Therefore, to execute both purposes, we first have to kill Jarasandha. I think that if we can somehow or other gain victory over Jarasandha, all our purposes will be automatically served. The imprisoned kings will be released, and with great pleasure we shall enjoy the spread of your transcendental fame for having saved the innocent kings whom Jarasandha has imprisoned. But King Jarasandha is not an ordinary man. He has proved a stumbling block even to great warriors because his bodily strength is equal to the strength of 10,000 elephants. Remember, Bhishma had more strength than that. If there's anyone who can conquer this king, he is none other than Bhima, not Bhishma. Bhimasena, because he also possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants. The best thing would be for Bhimasena to fight alone with him. Then there would be no unnecessary killing of many soldiers. In fact, Jarasandha will be very difficult to conquer when he stands with his Akshahini divisions of soldiers. We may therefore adopt a policy more favorable to the situation. We know that King Jarasandha is very much devoted to the Brahmanas and very charitably disposed toward them. He never refuses any request from a Brahmin. I think therefore that Bhimasena should approach Jarasandha in the dress of a Brahmin, beg charity from him, and then personally engage in fighting him. And in order to assure Bhimasena's victory, I think that your lordship should accompany him. If the fighting takes place in your presence, I am sure that Bhimasena will emerge victorious, for your presence makes everything impossible possible. Indeed, Lord Brahma creates this universe and Lord Shiva destroys it simply through your influence. So here you see Uddhava, who's actually giving the Supreme Personality of Godhead advice. Of course, Krishna doesn't need advice, but he engages his disciple, or his friend in this particular case, his confidant, in giving him advice as a service. Actually, you create and destroy this entire cosmic manifestation. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are only the superficially visible causes. Creation and destruction are actually performed by the invisible time factor, which is your impersonal representation. Everything is under the control of this time factor. If your invisible time factor can perform such wonderful acts through Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, will not your personal presence help Bhimasena conquer Jarasandha? My dear Lord, when Jarasandha is killed, the queens of all the imprisoned kings will be so joyful at their husbands being released by your mercy that they will all sing your glories, being as pleased as the gopis were when released from the hands of Shankachura. All the great sages, the king of the elephants, Gajendra, the goddess of fortune, Sita, and even your father and mother were all delivered by your causeless mercy. We also have been thus delivered, and we always sing the transcendental glories of your activities. Therefore, I think that if the killing of Jarasandha is undertaken first, that will automatically solve many other problems. As for the Rajasuya sacrifice arranged in Hastinapur, it will be held either because of the pious activities of the imprisoned kings or the impious activities of Jarasandha. My lord, it appears that you are to go personally to Hastinapur to conquer demoniac kings like Jarasandha and Shishupal, to release the pious imprisoned kings, and also to perform the great Rajasuya sacrifice. Considering all these points, I think that your lordship should immediately proceed to Hastinapura, which in this particular case is Indraprastha. Indraprastha is part of the greater area of Hastinapura. As I said before, the kingdom was divided in two to try to make peace between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Of course, that didn't work too well. This advice of Uddhava's was appreciated by all who were present in the assembly. Everyone considered that Lord Krishna's going to Hastinapura would be beneficial from all points of view. The great sage Narada, the elder personalities of the Yadu dynasty, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself all supported the statement of Uddhava. Lord Krishna then took permission from his father Vasudeva and grandfather Ugrasena, and he immediately ordered his servants Daruga and Jaitra to arrange for travel to Hastinapura. When everything was prepared, Lord Krishna especially bade farewell to Lord Balaram and the king of the Yadus, Ugrasena, and after dispatching his queens along with their children and sending their necessary luggage ahead, he mounted his chariot, which bore the flag marked with the symbol of Garuda. In other words, Krishna went with all of his queens, according to this text. That's a lot of queens, 16,108. Before starting the procession, Lord Krishna satisfied the great sage Narada by offering him different kinds of articles of worship. Naradaji wanted to fall at the lotus feet of Krishna, but because the Lord was playing the part of a human being, He simply offered his respects within his mind, and fixing the transcendental form of the Lord within his heart, he left the assembly house by the airways. Usually, the sage Narada does not walk on the surface of the globe, but travels in outer space. After the departure of Narada, Lord Krishna addressed the messenger who had come from the imprisoned kings and told them that they should not be worried, for he would very soon arrange to kill the king of Magadha, Jarasandha. Thus he wished good fortune to all the imprisoned kings and messenger. After receiving this assurance from Lord Krishna, the messenger returned to the imprisoned kings and informed them of the happy news of the Lord's forthcoming visit. All the kings were joyful at the news and began to wait very anxiously for the Lord's arrival. The chariot of Lord Krishna started for Hastinapura, accompanied by many other chariots, along with elephants, cavalry, infantry, and similar royal paraphernalia. Bugles, drums, trumpets, conch shells, and horns all produced a loud, auspicious sound which vibrated in all directions. The 16,000 queens, headed by the goddess of fortune, Rukmini Devi, the ideal wife of Lord Krishna, and accompanied by the respective sons, all followed behind Lord Krishna. They were dressed in costly garments decorated with ornaments, and their bodies were smeared with sandalwood pulp and garlanded with fragrant flowers. Riding on palanquins nicely decorated with silks, flags, and golden lace, they followed their exalted husband, Lord Krishna. The infantry soldiers carried shields, swords, and lances in their hands and acted as royal bodyguards to the queens. In the rear of the procession were the wives and children of all the other followers, and there were many society girls also following. Many beasts of burden like bulls, buffalo, mules, and asses carried the camps, bedding, and carpets, and the women who followed were seated in separate palanquins on the backs of camels. Not so nice to ride on a camel. Actually, they have bad breath, and they spit too. Yuck. Anyway, I'm sure those were spiritual camels. This panoramic procession was accompanied by the shouts of the people and was full with a display of different colored flags, umbrellas, and whisks, and different varieties of weapons, dress, ornaments, helmets, and armaments. Shining in the sunlight, the procession appeared just like an ocean with high waves and sharks. In this way, the procession of Lord Krishna's party advanced toward Hastinapura, that's New Delhi nowadays, and gradually passed through the kingdoms of Anartha, that's Gujarat province, Solavira, that's Surat, which is actually in Gujarat, the great desert of Rajasthan, which is a state of India, and then Kurukshetra. Between those kingdoms were many mountains, rivers, towns, villages, pasturing grounds, and mining fields. The procession passed through all these places in its advance. On his way to Hastinapura, the Lord crossed two big rivers, the Drishadvati and the Saraswati. Then he crossed the provinces of Panchala and Matsya. In this way, he ultimately arrived at Hastinapura, or Indraprastha. The audience of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not at all commonplace. Therefore, when King Yudhisthira heard that Lord Krishna had arrived in his capital city, Hastinapura, he became so joyful that all his bodily hairs stood on end in great ecstasy, and he immediately came out of the city to properly receive the Lord. He ordered the musical vibration of different instruments and songs, and the learned brahmanas of the city began to chant the hymns of the Vedas very loudly. Lord Krishna is known as Rishikesha, the master of the senses, and King Yudhisthira went forward to receive him exactly as the senses meet the consciousness of life. King Yudhisthira was the elder cousin of Krishna. Naturally, he had great affection for the Lord, and as soon as he saw him, his heart became filled with great love and affection. He had not seen the Lord for many days, and therefore he thought himself most fortunate to see the Lord present before him. The king therefore embraced Lord Krishna again and again in great affection. The eternal form of Lord Krishna is the everlasting residence of the goddess of fortune. As soon as King Yudhisthira embraced him, he became free from all the contamination of material existence. I mean, this is speaking euphemistically because he was already freed from contamination. He was a pure devotee. He immediately felt transcendental bliss and merged in an ocean of happiness. There were tears in his eyes and his body shook in ecstasy. He completely forgot that he was living in this material world. After this, Bhima, Sena, the second brother of the Pandavas, smiled and embraced Lord Krishna. thinking of him as his own maternal cousin, and thus he also merged in great ecstasy. Bhimasena was so filled with ecstasy that for the time being he forgot his material existence. Then Lord Sri Krishna himself embraced the other three Pandavas, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev. The eyes of all three brothers were inundated with tears, and Arjuna embraced Krishna again and again because they were intimate friends. The two younger Pandava brothers, after being embraced by Lord Krishna, fell down at his lotus feet to offer their respects. That's the etiquette, because they were younger than Krishna. Arjuna was the same age. Lord Krishna thereafter offered his obeisances to the Brahmanas present, as well as to the elder members of the Kuru dynasty like Bhishma, Drona, and Dhritarashtra. There were many kings of different provinces, such as Kuru, Srinjaya, and Kaikeya, and Lord Krishna duly reciprocated greetings and respects with them. The professional reciters, like the Sutas, Magadhas, and Bandis, accompanied by the Brahmanas, offered their respectful prayers to the Lord. Performing artists like the Gandharvas, as well as the royal jokers, began to play their Pandava drums, conch shells, kettle drums, veenas, mridangas, and bugles, and they exhibited their dancing art to please the Lord. Thus the all-famous personality of Godhead Sri Krishna entered the great city of Hastinapura, which was opulent in every respect. While Lord Krishna was entering the city, all the people talked amongst themselves about the qualities or glories of the Lord, praising his transcendental name, qualities, form, and so on. The roads, streets, and lanes of Hastinapura were all sprinkled with fragrant water through the trunks of intoxicated elephants. In different places of the city, there were colorful festoons and flags decorating the houses and streets. At important crossroads, there were gates with golden decorations, and at the two sides of the gates there were golden water jugs. These beautiful decorations glorified the opulence of the city. Participating in this great ceremony, all the citizens gathered here and there, dressed in colorful new clothing and decorated with ornaments, flower garlands, and fragrant scents. The houses were illuminated by hundreds and thousands of lamps placed in different corners of the cornices, walls, columns, bases, and architraves, whatever that is. And from far away, the rays of the lamps appeared to be celebrating the festival of Deepavali. That's a particular festival observed on the New Year's Day of the Hindu calendar. That's Diwali. Within the walls of the houses, fragrant incense was burning and smoke rose through the windows, making the entire atmosphere very pleasing. On the top of every house, flags were flapping, and the golden water pots kept on the roofs shone beautifully, brilliantly. Lord Krishna thus entered the city of the Pandavas, enjoyed the beautiful atmosphere, and slowly proceeded ahead. When the young girls in every house heard that Lord Krishna, the only object worth seeing, was passing on the road, they were very eager to see this all-famous personality. Their hair loosened and their tightened saris became slack due to their hastily rushing to see him. They gave up their household engagements, and those who were lying in bed with their husbands immediately left them and came directly down to the street to see Lord Krishna. The procession of elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry was very crowded. Some of the girls, being unable to see properly in the crowd, got up on the roofs of the houses. Pleased to see Lord Krishna passing with his thousands of queens, they showered flowers on the procession, embraced Lord Krishna within their minds, and gave him a hearty reception. When they saw him in the midst of his many queens, like the full moon situated amidst many luminaries, they began to talk amongst themselves. One girl said to another, "My dear friend, it is very difficult to guess what kind of pious activities these queens have performed, for they are always enjoying the smiling face and loving glances of Krishna." While Lord Krishna was thus passing on the road, at intervals some of the citizens, who were all rich, respectable, and freed from sinful activities, presented auspicious articles to the Lord, just to offer him a reception to the city. Thus they worshipped him as humble servitors. When Lord Krishna entered the palace, all the ladies there were overwhelmed with affection just upon seeing him. They immediately received Lord Krishna with glittering eyes, expressing their love and affection for him, and then Lord Krishna smiled and accepted their feelings and gestures of reception. When Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, saw her nephew, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she was overpowered by love and affection. She at once got up from her bedstead and appeared before him with her daughter-in-law, Draupadi. and in material love and affection she embraced him. As Maharaj Yudhisthira brought Krishna within the palace, the king became so confused in his jubilation that he practically forgot what he was going to do at the time to receive Krishna and offer him and worship him properly. Lord Krishna delightfully offered his respects and obeisances to Kunti and other elder ladies of the palace. His younger sister Subhadra was also standing there with Draupadi, and both offered their respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of the Lord. At the indication of her mother-in-law, Draupadi brought clothing, ornaments, and garlands, and with this paraphernalia they received the queens Rukmini, Satyabhama, Bhadra, Jambavati, Kalindi, Mitravinda, Lakshmana, and the devoted Satya. These principal queens of Lord Krishna were first received, and then the other queens were also offered a proper reception. King Yudhisthira arranged for Krishna's rest and saw to it that all who came along with him, namely his queens, soldiers, ministers, and secretaries, were comfortably situated. He had arranged that they would experience a new feature of reception every day while staying as guests of the Pandavas. It was during this time that Lord Krishna, with the help of Arjuna, allowed the fire god Agni to devour the Kandava forest for his satisfaction. I talked about that. During the forest fire, Krishna saved the demon Mayasura, was hiding in the forest. Upon being saved, Mayasura felt obliged to the Pandavas and Lord Krishna, and he constructed a wonderful assembly house within the city of Hastinapura. To please King Yudhisthira, Lord Krishna remained in the city of Hastinapura for several months. During his stay, he enjoyed strolling here and there. He used to drive on chariots with Arjuna, and many warriors and soldiers used to follow them. So in other words, Krishna had a good time with his good buddy Arjuna. So thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 71st chapter of Krishna, Lord Krishna in Indraprastha city. So now it's 72. The liberation of King Jarasandha, which means killing King Jarasandha. In the great assembly, respectable citizens, friends, relatives, brahmanas, sages, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, in the presence of all, including his brothers, King Yudhisthira directly addressed Lord Krishna as follows. My dear Lord Krishna, the sacrifice known as Rajasuya Yagya is to be performed by the emperor and is considered the king of all sacrifices. By performing this sacrifice, I wish to satisfy all the demigods who are your empowered representatives within this material world, and I wish that you will kindly help me in this great venture so that it may be successfully executed. As far as the Pandavas are concerned, we have nothing to ask from the demigods. We are personally fully satisfied to be your devotees. As you say in the Bhagavad Gita, persons bewildered by material desires worship the demigods. Interesting, he's quoting from the Bhagavad Gita before the Bhagavad Gita was spoken on the battlefield, but the Bhagavad Gita was actually known even before that. But my purpose is different. I want to perform this Rajasuya sacrifice and invite the demigods to show that they have no power independent of you, that they are all your servants and you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Foolish persons with a poor fund of knowledge consider your lordship an ordinary human being. Sometimes they try to find fault in you, and sometimes they defame you. Therefore, I wish to perform this Rajasuya Yagya. I wish to invite all the demigods, beginning from Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and other exalted chiefs of the heavenly planets, and in that great assembly of demigods from all parts of the universe, I want to substantiate that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that everyone is your servant. My dear Lord, those who are constantly in Krishna consciousness and who think of your lotus feet or your shoes, are certainly freed from all contamination of material life. Such persons who engage in your service in full Krishna consciousness, who meditate upon you only and offer prayers unto you, are purified souls. Being constantly engaged in Krishna conscious service, they are freed from the cycle of repeated birth and death. Or even if they do not want to be freed from this material existence, but desire to enjoy material opulences, their desires are also fulfilled by their Krishna conscious activities. In fact, those who are pure devotees to your lotus feet have no desire for material opulences. As far as we are concerned, we are fully surrendered unto your lotus feet, and by your grace, we are so fortunate as to see you personally. Therefore, naturally, we have no desire for material opulences, The verdict of the Vedic wisdom is that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I want to establish this fact, and I also want to show the world the difference between accepting you as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and accepting you as an ordinary, powerful, historical person. I wish to show the world that one can attain the highest perfection of life simply by taking shelter at your lotus feet, exactly as one can satisfy the branches, twigs, leaves, and flowers of an entire tree simply by watering the root. If one takes the Krishna consciousness, his life becomes fulfilled both materially and spiritually. This does not mean that you are partial to the Krishna conscious person and indifferent to the non-Krishna conscious person. You are equal to everyone. That is your declaration. You cannot be partial to one and not interested in others, for you sit in everyone's heart as the supersoul and give everyone the respective results of his fruitive activities. You give every living entity the chance to enjoy this material world as he desires. As the supersoul, you sit in the body with the living entity, giving him the results of his own actions as well as the opportunities to turn toward your devotional service by developing Krishna consciousness. You openly declare that one should surrender unto you, giving up all other engagements, and that you will take charge of him, giving him relief from the reactions of all sins. Still, the living entity remains attached to material activities and suffers or enjoys the reactions without your interference. You are like the desired tree in the heavenly planets, which awards benedictions according to one's desires. Everyone is free to achieve the highest perfection, but if one does not so desire, then your awarding of lesser benedictions is not due to partiality. On hearing the statement by King Yudhisthira, Lord Krishna replied as follows: My dear King Yudhisthira, O killer of the enemies, O ideal justice personified, I completely support your decision to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. After you perform this great sacrifice, your good name will remain well established forever in the history of human civilization. My dear King, I may inform you that all the great sages, your forefathers, the demigods, and your relatives and friends, including me, desire that you perform this sacrifice, and I think it will satisfy every living entity. But I request that you first conquer all the kings of the world and collect all the requisite paraphernalia for executing this great sacrifice. My dear King Yudhisthira, your forebrothers are direct representatives of the important demigods like Vayu and Indra. So it is said that Bhima was born of the demigod Vayu, Arjuna was born of the demigod Indra, whereas King Yudhisthira himself, actually, went too far. Whoops. Went too far. Wait a second. Let's go down the way. But King Yudhisthira himself was born of the demigod Yamaraj. As such, your brothers are great heroes, and you're the most pious and self-controlled king, and are therefore known as Dharmaraj. All of you are so qualified in devotional service to me that I've automatically been conquered by you. Lord Krishna told King Yudhisthira that he is conquered by the love of one who has conquered his senses. One who has not conquered his senses cannot conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the secret of devotional service. To conquer the senses means to engage them constantly in the service of the Lord. The specific qualification of all the Pandava brothers was that they would always engage their senses in the Lord's service. One who thus engages his senses becomes purified, and with purified senses, the devotee can actually render transcendental loving service to the Lord and conquer him. Lord Krishna continued, there is no one in the three worlds of the universe, including the powerful demigods, who could surpass my devotees in any of the six opulences, namely wealth, strength, reputation, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. Therefore, if you want to conquer the worldly kings, there is no possibility of their emerging victorious. When Lord Krishna thus encouraged King Yudhisthira, the king's face brightened like a blossoming flower because of transcendental happiness, and thus he ordered his younger brothers to conquer all the worldly kings in all directions. Lord Krishna empowered the Pandavas to execute his great mission of chastising the infidel miscreants of the world and giving protection to his faithful devotees. In his Vishnu form, the Lord carries 4 weapons in his 4 hands. A lotus flower and conch shell in 2 hands, and in the other 2 hands, a club and disc. The club and disc are meant for the infidel miscreants and demons, and the lotus flower and conch shell are for the devotees. Just like Dhruva Maharaj got blessed by the conch shell. But because the Lord is the supreme absolute, the result of all his weapons is one and the same. With the club and the disc, he chastises the miscreants, so that they may come to their senses and know that they are not all in all, for above them there is the Supreme Lord. And by bugling with the conch shell and offering blessings with the lotus flower, he always assures the devotees that no one can vanquish them even in the greatest calamity. King Yudhisthira, being thus assured by the indication of Lord Krishna, ordered his younger brother Sahadev, accompanied by soldiers of the Srinjaya tribe, to conquer the southern countries. Similarly, he ordered Nakula, accompanied by the soldiers of Matsya Desha, to conquer the kings of the western side. He sent Arjuna, accompanied by the soldiers of Kekaya Desha, to conquer the kings of the northern side, and he ordered Bhima Sen, accompanied by the soldiers of Madra Desha, to conquer the kings on the eastern side. It may be noted that by dispatching his younger brothers to conquer in different directions, King Yudhisthira did not actually intend that they declare war upon the kings. Actually, the brothers started for different directions to inform their respective kings about King Yudhisthira's intention to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. The kings were thus informed that they were required to pay taxes for the execution of the sacrifice. This payment of taxes to Emperor Yudhisthira meant that the king accepted subjugation before him. In case of a king's refusal to act accordingly, there was certainly a fight. Thus, by their influence and strength, the brothers conquered all the kings in different directions, and they were able to bring sufficient taxes and presentations, which they brought before King Yudhisthira. King Yudhisthira was very anxious, however, when he heard that King Jarasandha of Magadha did not accept his sovereignty. Seeing King Yudhisthira's anxiety, Lord Krishna informed him of the plan explained by Uddhava for conquering King Jarasandha. Bhima Sen, Arjuna, and Lord Krishna then started together for Girivraja, the capital city of Jarasandha, dressing themselves in the garb of Brahmanas. This was the plan devised by Uddhava before Lord Krishna started for Hastinapur, and now was given practical application. King Jarasandha was a very dutiful householder, and he had great respect for the Brahmanas. He was a great fighter, a Kshatriya king, but he was never neglectful of the Vedic injunctions. According to the Vedic injunctions, the Brahmanas are considered to be the spiritual masters of all other castes. Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and Bhima were actually Kshatriyas, but they dressed themselves as Brahmanas. And at the time when King Jarasandha was to give charity to the Brahmanas and receive them as guests, they approached him. Lord Krishna, in the dress of a Brahmana, said to the king, "We wish all glories to your majesty. We 3 guests at your royal palace have come from a great distance to ask you for charity, and we hope that you will kindly bestow upon us whatever we ask from you. We know about your good qualities. A person who is tolerant is always prepared to tolerate everything, even though distressful. Just as a criminal can perform the most abominable acts, a greatly charitable person like you can give anything and everything for which he has asked. For a great personality like you, there is no distinction between relatives and outsiders." So here Krishna is praising Jarasandha to get what he wants. Actually, they say, too much devotion, Prabhupada said this, too much devotion is a sign of a thief. So Krishna was actually acting like a thief in this particular case. A famous man lives forever even after his death. Therefore, any person who is completely fit and able to execute acts which will perpetuate his good name and fame, and yet does not do so, becomes abominable in the eyes of great persons. Such persons cannot be condemned enough, and his refusal to give charity is lamentable throughout his whole life. Your Majesty must have heard the glorious names of charitable persons such as Harish Chandra, Rantidev, and Mudgala. He used to live only on grains picked up from the paddy field, and the great Maharaj Shivi, who saved the life of a pigeon by supplying flesh from his own body. These great personalities have attained immortal fame simply by sacrificing the perishable body. Lord Krishna, in the garb of a Brahmana, thus convinced Jarasandha that fame is imperishable, but the body is perishable. If one can attain imperishable name and fame by sacrificing his perishable body, he becomes a very respectable figure in the history of human civilization. While Lord Krishna was speaking in the garb of a Brahmin along with Arjuna and Bhima, Jarasandha marked that the three of them did not appear to be actual Brahmins. There were signs on their bodies by which Jarasandha could understand that they were Kshatriyas. Their shoulders were marked with impressions due to carrying bows. They had beautiful bodily structure and their voices were grave and commanding. Thus he definitely concluded that they were not Brahmanas but Kshatriyas. He also thought that he had seen them somewhere before, but although these three persons were Kshatriyas, they had come to his door begging alms like Brahmanas. Therefore he decided that he would fulfill their desires in spite of their being Kshatriyas, because they had already diminished their position by appearing before him as beggars. Under the circumstances, he thought, I am prepared to give them anything. Even if they ask for my body, I shall not hesitate to offer it to them. In this regard, he began to think of Bali Maharaj. Lord Vishnu, in the dress of a Brahmin, appeared as a beggar before Bali and snatched away all of his opulence and his kingdom. He did this for the benefit of Indra, who, having been defeated by Bali Maharaj, was bereft of his kingdom. Although Bali Maharaj was cheated, his reputation as a great devotee, able to give anything and everything in charity, is still glorified throughout the three worlds. Bali Maharaj could guess that the Brahmana was Lord Vishnu himself and had come to him just to take away his opulent kingdom on behalf of Indra. Bali's spiritual master and family priest, Shukracharya, repeatedly warned him about this, yet Bali did not hesitate to give in charity whatever the Brahmana wanted, and at last he gave up everything to that Brahmana. It is my strong determination, thought Jarasandha, that if I can achieve immortal reputation by sacrificing this perishable body, I must act for that purpose. The life of a Kshatriya who does not live for the benefit of the Brahmanas is certainly condemned. Actually, King Jarasandha was very liberal in giving charity to Brahmanas, and thus he informed Lord Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna, My dear Brahmanas, you may ask from me whatever you like. If you so desire, you may take my head also. I am prepared to give it. After this, Lord Krishna addressed Jarasandha as follows. My dear king, please note that we are not actually Brahmanas, nor have we come to ask for food or grain. We are all Kshatriyas and we have come to beg a duel with you. We hope that you will agree to this proposal. You may note that here is the second son of King Pandu, Bhima, and the third son of Pandu, Arjuna. As for myself, you may know that I am your old enemy, Krishna, the cousin of the Pandavas. So, anyway, we'll continue this tomorrow. So we're on chapter 72. And they just disclosed their identities, and now we will take some questions. Okay, so we'll hear about the fighting tomorrow. That's exciting. So stop sharing, and we allow you to unmute yourselves. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? You can type in the chat window, you can raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself. So, any questions does anyone have? Now's your opportunity. Ooh, no questions. Interesting. No questions. Nobody has any questions today. All right. Maybe we should just continue reading till the time's up. Since there's no questions, then we'll go back to the text and continue reading until the time is up. Until it's... Oh, now we got a question. Okay. Rakesh.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
In devotional service, like when we start, like I'm talking about myself, very enthusiastic, but as the time moved on, I start to feel a bit like lazy, I would say, or not doing, like I start to feel like uh tired. That's the word. Like why
Yeah.
why it doesn't increases all the time? Why our desire for resource like
There's several reasons. There's several reasons for that. One is that as we continue devotional service, we have more opportunities to commit offenses against Vaishnavas. So we're committing offenses against Vaishnavas, and then we're losing the taste and enthusiasm that we had in the beginning. The second one is we become complacent and we just execute our devotional service ritualistically, which is called niyam agraha. And by executing it ritualistically, not thinking of what we're doing while we're doing it, or what the purpose is of what we're doing while we're doing it, we're committing an offense. That's inattentive devotional service, inattentive chanting. And also, there's other types of offenses we may commit. We may commit offense to the holy Dhamma. We may commit offenses to the deities by being inattentive. There's all sorts of different offenses that are committed. Generally, it's understood that it's really due to offenses, one way or the other, offenses to the Vaishnavas, or offenses to the holy name, or general complacency, or cultivating weeds in our heart. But generally, I would say it's offenses to devotees is the reason we're actually not as enthusiastic.
how do we rectify it? How once we have noticed the anarthas coming up, like the side effects, and how do we go about it? Like
Stop the things that are causing the anarthas. Anarthas are caused by sinful activities, are caused by attachment to pious activities, are caused by pride and bhakti, or they are caused by offenses. Just be aware, become more self-aware, and rectify those things. If you offend a Vaishnava, you should go to the Vaishnava and beg for forgiveness and be humble enough to admit that you made a mistake. For most of us, it's very hard to admit that we actually made mistakes. So that's really why. So you can rectify. You just have to go to the devotees. You have to stop the offenses. You have to be aware of what you're doing, not just do things ritualistically, not even offer obeisances ritualistically. You have to offer obeisances thinking about what it means and how it affects you, and emotional. There has to be some emotional connection. Okay, here's another question in the chat window. Question in the chat window. How come Duryodhana agreed to Yudhishthira's performance of the Rajasuya Yagya and establishing him as the emperor of the other kings? Thank you, Gurudev. It's not that Yudhishthira agreed with it, but he had no ability to stop it. I mean, he had no ability to stop it. I mean, Yudhishthira had all this support. And he also agreed with it because he was thinking that if Yudhishthira is able to perform this Rajasuya sacrifice and get the support of all the kings, then later on he's going to take over Indraprastha and he's going to have that same position. So he also was thinking strategically that if Yudhishthira becomes so powerful, Indraprastha is powerful, then eventually, because of my dear Uncle Shakuni's manipulations, I will be able to take over Indraprastha. So there's many different reasons why he agreed with that. But he understood that somehow or other he was following the advice of Shakuni. Shakuni really just manipulated everything in many different ways and contaminated everything. Although we understand that Duryodhana was an incarnation of Kali and Shakuni was an incarnation of Dwarpa. So there were two personalities who normally work together to make problems. I mean, just like you have that story of Nal and Damayanti. I think any of you know that story of Nal and Damayanti. In the story of Nal and Damayanti, Nal was defeated by dice and his mind became contaminated because Kali entered into his mind and Dwarpa became the dice. And he eventually gambled away everything. His whole kingdom became bereft of everything. His whole consciousness became polluted. Because Dwarpa and Kali, they were very upset that he married this beautiful girl, Damayanti. I'm not going to tell the whole story of Damayanti, but it's a really interesting story. the story of Nal and Damayanti. You can look it up on the internet, or you can look it up in the Mahabharata if you happen to read the Mahabharata. It's a great historical narration. And there's a happy ending to it. Eventually, Nal gets back after much endeavor, and really interesting story. He actually becomes transformed into a very ugly person, and anyway, not going to give the story. It's so complicated, this story. Then eventually, they get back together, and he lives happily ever after with Damayanti. It's a love story, but there's many lessons to be learned from this particular story. Okay? No, Damayanti. So, anybody else have any questions here?
What's the difference between Gurudev pious activity and transcendental activity, please?
Highest activity gives you motive goodness activity according to the Vedic injunctions to give you some material benefit. Like a pious activity would be like digging lakes or something for the benefit of people, or performing different sacrifices that are not devotional sacrifices. And you get some pious credit, and because of that pious credit, you go to heaven. But the problem is when you go to heaven, because of all your pious credit, when the pious credit runs out, Shane Punya Mark, Lokam Vishanti, you come back down to the earth planet. But the difference is devotional activities are meant to please Krishna. They're part of the ninefold process, hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., up to Atmanivedanam and surrendering to Krishna, are all centered on pleasing Krishna and pleasing Krishna's devotees. That's the difference. Pious activities are basically trying to make your best effort at trying to enjoy this material world, or at least be in the mode of goodness, so you don't suffer so much in this world. That's pious activities. So that's the difference. And pious activities have a beginning and an end. You lose them after some time. Whereas devotional service, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's no loss or diminution. Whatever devotional service you do, whatever advancement you make, you don't lose the benefits of that devotional service. That's the difference. All right. And just on time. It's time to end. So thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see everybody tomorrow evening, same time, same station. All glory is to His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami.